What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Seahawks Now, your home for all things daily Seahawks news, coverage, and updates. Today, we're talking Amari Cooper rumors. Could the veteran wide receiver find a new home in Seattle? We talk about Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson. Could he be a solid late-round addition for the Seahawks? And Russell Wilson has found a new home. We discuss if the Seahawks made the right call in trading him 3 years ago. All that and more right here today on Seahawks Now. But first, Amari Cooper, the veteran wideout, is not retiring. He is looking for a new home right now. Some potential options that are being proposed are the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Patriots. It was certainly a disappointing season last year for Amari Cooper. He barely made it over 500 yards. He went for 547 yards on 44 receptions, so he averaged about 12 yards per reception, and he caught 4 touchdown passes, 2 with the Browns and 2 with the Buffalo Bills. But he is still playing. He has made it clear he wants to play, and so yeah, there's a possibility that could he come to Seattle? He's only going to be 30. That's the interesting thing about Amari Cooper is he's actually not that old. He's going to be 31. He turns 31 next year. I guess he turns 31 in June. So he'll be 31 next year. A former first-round pick, actually 4th overall from the, at that point, it was the Oakland Raiders. And right away, he broke out to the scene. 1,000 yards in 2015, 2016, 1,000 yards again in 2018, again in 2019 with Dallas, and then again in 2020 with Dallas. And then he went for 1,000 yards in 2022 with Cleveland, and again in 2023 with Cleveland. So he's only 1 year removed from what was a really good, in 2023, he caught 5 touchdowns, went for 1,250 yards in 15 starts, 72 receptions, 17.4 yards per reception, and he was a Pro Bowler that year with an approximate value score of 10. So he's only 1 year removed from that. The fact that he had such a down year last year, you could chalk it up to some injuries. He only started 10 games. This is the lowest of his career. I still think he can be a good player. I still think he can be a really good player. At 31 years old, we've seen wide receivers play very well at 31. So would he make sense? As a deep play threat for the Seahawks, I absolutely think he would. He's not a slot receiver the same way that, right now we got Kupp, slot receiver, right? JSN, slot receiver. They're both really good at what they do, but if you added more of a deep threat, a guy who could just go downfield and catch deep bombs, I think that would be massive. I think that would really help this team out. It would really kind of help just the build of this team, the makeup of this team, the chemistry of this team. So yeah, bringing in a guy like Amari Cooper, I could totally get behind that. Where I do see the problem potentially would be cost-wise, because I think if you're paying for Amari Cooper, you don't want to pay that $15, $16 million. We probably can't even afford that in the cap space. What we really would like is to bring in Amari Cooper on a deal that's not much more than MVS, because right now you got MVS for $5 million. I think Amari Cooper would, at this point in his career, he's like a better version of Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's not going to be your wide receiver 1. He's probably maybe not even going to be wide receiver 2, but he's a really solid wide receiver 3 who can do a lot of the same things MVS does. I'd be willing to go maybe $7, $8, maybe $9 million max for Amari Cooper, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. Again, I'm not sure if that's what he's looking for, but if he's open to playing on what would be considered, obviously it would be a pay cut for him. But if he's open to doing that, if he wants to come win a championship in Seattle, because, he's never won a championship before. Seattle, pretty good defense, pretty good quarterback, pretty good offense. I don't know. It could be the spot for him to come and get a ring. Well, speaking of guys coming to Seattle, how about Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson? I'm continuing my series on wide receiver draft targets. Tez Johnson is the next guy on the agenda. Comes out of Oregon, and he's an interesting prospect for sure. Kind of smaller, 898 yards last year, 83 receptions, and here's the key stat: 10 touchdowns. He got 10 touchdown passes last year. That's really good. Obviously, 10.8 yards per reception. 74.8 yards per game. That is what Tez Johnson did last year. According to Lance Zierlein, his NFL comparison is Tank Dell. He's a productive high-volume slot receiver whose evaluation will include balancing the playmaking against his lack of traits. So he doesn't really have the traits. He is only 5'10", 154 pounds, 9-inch hands. His athleticism score was a 64, so that ranked 45th. His NFL prospect grade was a 6.0. He has the traits or talent to be an above average backup. So they kind of see him as, maybe a high end wide receiver 3, potential wide receiver 2. The thing about Tez Johnson is, I would like him if we already didn't have two slot receivers. Some of his strengths: high volume target, ability to play inside, adequate early acceleration, open safeties up downfield, and he's too slippery to apprehend quickly after the catch. His weaknesses are that he just doesn't have the strength right now, and he has average suddenness for a smaller slot target. Small frame, skinny limbs. That's kind of so. A lot of his weaknesses are more physical attributes there. Again, if we didn't already have JSN and Cooper Kupp, I would be a lot more interested, I think, in bringing in a guy like Tez Johnson. Unfortunately, I think that because we already have JSN, who kind of does what he does better, I'm not sure if Tez Johnson is the right fit. He's being projected to be maybe a 4th or 5th round pick. So again, I wouldn't be mad if the Seahawks did draft him. But as far as the scheme goes, I'm not sure if he's really necessarily a fit because his spots are already kind of taken on the field. His spots are already kind of blocked. All right, let's move on. Russell Wilson is in New York. Did the Seahawks make the right call at quarterback? Interesting question for sure. I think the answer to that, though, is yes. I think they did. Obviously, Russell Wilson had a great run here, but the past 3 years, he's looked nothing like the guy who was in Seattle. He's looked like a totally different player. He's looked like a guy who just doesn't have the confidence. And I think for me, it's kind of a lesson in hubris. It's a lesson in pride. It's a lesson in ego. Russell Wilson, he thought he was better than what the Seahawks were willing to pay. He thought he was better than what the Seahawks offered him, and he thought he could win without Pete Carroll. He wanted to prove himself that he could win without the Legion of Boom, without Pete Carroll, without DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, without all these other great players. So he went to Denver, and he forced his way out of Seattle, I think because of his pride, because of his hubris, and he struggled. The grass, as it turns out, is not always greener, and it definitely was not for Russell Wilson. I think the Seahawks definitely made the right call. Moving on to Geno Smith, got them back to the playoffs, 3 straight winning seasons, and it feels like the Seahawks have really figured things out now. They figured out more direction. Now they have a young, talented quarterback, a young, talented defense. They have more cap space than most teams do in the league, more draft picks coming up next year than most teams in the league. I really think they handled everything really well, and I'm very pleased by John Schneider for finding ways to pivot. Obviously, losing Russell Wilson, it's a tough player to overcome that loss, but the Seahawks were able to do it. The Seahawks were able to find a replacement right away. They got Geno Smith. Now they moved on to Sam Darnold. They're figuring it out. Meanwhile, Russ, he's going to New York. He's going to have to really kind of revitalize his career, and he's going to have to do it on a team that doesn't have much talent, doesn't have a proven coaching staff, and plays in a really tough division where the Eagles and the Commanders right now are miles ahead of the Giants. So the Giants, they're way behind in their division, and they got an aging Russell Wilson. I do kind of feel bad for the guy. On one hand, I want him to be in the Hall of Fame, and it kind of sucks that maybe that's not going to happen anymore. On the other hand, he kind of did this to himself. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this up for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. Until then, go Seahawks.